6 weeks ago, Google AI Studio could import a GitHub repository, then lose the connection. Google's own demo warned that imported code would not stay synced. Now the missing half has landed. AI Studio can push its changes back to GitHub, pull outside changes in, and surface merges and force pushes in a new sync interface. That is a much bigger upgrade than another import button. But the 45-second demo also leaves some important questions unanswered. Here is what changed. You can still start by selecting Import from GitHub in build mode. The new part comes after the code is inside AI Studio. Google's demo shows changes ready to push, a sync action, and a return to a clean state. Then it shows new external changes and a path to pull those changes back into the workspace. The current Google documentation says the same thing in plain language. Connect an app to a GitHub repository for two-way sync. Push changes prompted in AI Studio with AI-generated commit messages. Or pull changes made in an IDE or by teammates back into AI Studio. That closes a real workflow gap. Our July review covered the earlier snapshot import. At that time, existing code could enter build mode, Gemini could work on it, and you could export the result, but the original repository was not a live round trip. Developers on Google's forum were asking for exactly this missing path. They wanted to push updates back to the existing repository instead of creating a second one, because a second repository breaks deployment history, collaboration, and normal review. The new workflow has two distinct uses. First, you can bring an existing app into AI Studio, ask Gemini for a focus change, and push the resulting commit back to GitHub. Second, a teammate can change the project in a normal editor, push that work, and AI Studio can pull the latest state back in. That second case is what turns this from an import feature into a shared development loop. Google's post also mentions new interface support for merges and force pushes. The current docs go further on conflicts. AI Studio can show a side-by-side resolve conflicts dialog, let you choose the AI Studio or GitHub version for each file, then commit and sync. Google warns that syncing overwrites files in the opposite location, and those changes cannot be undone. That is useful documentation, but the short vendor demo never shows the conflict screen, a force push safeguard, protected branches, Git large file storage, submodules, very large monorepos, organization policies, or pull request review. So conflict recovery is documented, while force push behavior is still an announced capability that was not independently tested here. Setup is straightforward in concept. You need access to Google AI Studio, a GitHub account, the Google AI Studio GitHub app authorized for the repository, and enough repository permission for the action you want. Google lists an 18+ age requirement and supported region limits for AI Studio, but does not publish a rollout percentage or a separate generally available or preview label for this sync feature. Use the narrowest practical repository access. Then manage the connection in the GitHub tab under Settings. If a repository does not appear, check the GitHub app installation, selected repository access, and your own permission before reconnecting anything. That last point matters because recovery is still underdocumented. A recent user report described an AI Studio workspace losing its repository binding after disconnecting and reconnecting the GitHub integration. Import could still see the repository, but the original workspace could not reassociate with it. That report came before this release, so it does not prove the new update has the same failure. It does prove why you should keep both sides recoverable. Download a zip backup before reconnecting, merging, or force pushing. Preserve the GitHub history, preserve the AI Studio state, and avoid destructive fixes until you know which copy is newer. There is also a privacy decision. Under Google's current terms, direct use of Google AI Studio is an unpaid service. Google says content submitted to unpaid services, plus generated responses, may be used to improve products and machine learning technologies. Human reviewers may process inputs and outputs after Google takes steps to disconnect them from account and project identifiers. The terms explicitly say not to submit sensitive, confidential, or personal information to unpaid services. For repository import, that warning deserves more attention than the convenience of one-click sync. Do not bring regulated data, customer secrets, credentials, or proprietary code into the unpaid workflow without an approved policy and the right account terms. Google says AI Studio usage is free in available regions and lists no separate price for GitHub Sync. That does not make the whole workflow cost-free. A linked paid API key, shared app usage, cloud run deployment, and other connected services can create charges. Google also says it does not claim ownership over generated content, but you remain responsible for generated code, licenses, security, and what you ship. So who is this for? It is a strong fit for prototypes, small applications, focused feature branches, and developers who already inspect commits and diffs. It is useful when AI Studio's Gemini first app builder is the fastest place to make a change, but GitHub must remain the source of truth. It is a weak fit for confidential projects on unpaid services, regulated work, or teams that need documented enterprise Git controls before they let an agent write to a production repository. My safe test is simple. Start with a disposable repository or branch. Import it. Make one harmless change in AI Studio. Push, then inspect the generated commit and every changed file on GitHub. Make one external edit in your normal editor and pull it back. Create a controlled conflict, verify recovery, and keep a zip backup before you test a merge or force push. If all of that behaves correctly, expand gradually. The verdict is positive, with one condition. Two-way GitHub sync fixes the biggest limitation from the July import release and makes Google AI Studio much more credible as part of a real development workflow. But the mature parts of Git still matter: branches, reviews, tests, backups, and visible history. Use AI Studio to accelerate the work. Let GitHub preserve the truth.